Now on breach of peace, okay, because everything comes down to breach of peace. How do we know this? Until somebody can bring the Creator in to say that anybody can impose their will on another. It is self-evident. All are equal under the law. Nobody is above the law. Therefore, nobody can prove to have authority, the right to impose their will on another, i.e. cause another harm. Okay? Now, the breach of peace is where everything starts. So I've talked about the Justice of Peace Act 1361. Why is it still current statute law? Because it stood the test of time of truth. And the truth is self-evident, expressed in the U.S. Declaration of, or the Constitution of America. It is self-evident. The problem is they've not explained why it's self-evident, i.e. there's no standing to it. The reason it's self-evident is the rules of the game, of the material, is evidence-based, applying logic and reason. Okay? And therefore, the rules of evidence are present your belief. It's a claim. Everybody is merely making claims. A statement is a claim. Okay? It does not make it fact. An affidavit is not fact. Okay? A notarized document is not fact. In the courts, every piece of evidence is subject to cross-examination. So bring the Creator in until somebody can do that under your rules in your court. Okay? Then it's self-evident, all are equal under the law. That means what one can do, all can do. Nobody is above the law means when we do a wrong, we must fix the problem. Okay? And nobody can prove the right to impose their will on another. Okay? And in equity, it's very simply summarized. Equity acts in person, our conscience dictates right from wrong, and equity will not suffer a wrong without a remedy. Okay? That's the simplicity of it all. Therefore, we have the right to follow our conscience, which dictates right from wrong, until we impose on another's right. When we impose on another's right, therefore, we must agree to respective duties, rights, and obligations, and by our free will consent to bind ourselves to those as to how that interaction will be managed. And when one of us breaches that obligation, then we are causing harm. And we might accidentally do it, okay? And if we bump into one another in the town, or we don't know one another, we accidentally might bump into one another and just say, sorry, because there was no intent, okay? The substance behind it, okay? So basically, a breach of peace was summarized in R versus Hal. R is us, the people, represented by Regina, the monarch, okay? And that's how we express ourselves in Parliament and control those government. So they went through all the case law for the hundreds of years and says, what is a breach of peace? A breach of peace is when somebody causes another harm or intends to cause another harm. So that's the definition of the breach of peace. So the elements are harm being caused and application of the minds. The facts, okay, actus reus, and mens rea, the state of the mind. The court always looks at both. Okay, shit happens, but if shit happens, you're not doing it with ill intent, therefore you have no liability. It's a pure accident. So, to breach another's peace, we must show the evidence in advance. We have no right to impose our will. Oh, I feel or I think. Okay? If you haven't got evidence, you have no lawful excuse to breach another's peace. And this goes to the full extent that order following is not lawful excuse. Each individual is sovereign. From the traditional word of the sovereign, we are self-empowered. Now, I don't like the word sovereign because sovereign is truth. Truth is sovereign. Truth will always prevail. Therefore, truth is the ultimate power or source of power, which sovereignty means the source of power. So, if we cannot knowingly cause another harm, that means we have the obligation to keep the peace ourselves, but it goes then beyond the self, because it's self-evident, if we don't have the right to free association, that the human race will die out. Okay? So each of us has an individual personal responsibility and obligation to one another to keep the peace, that we do not breach another's peace, and we have the right to enforce others keep the peace.
Page 36?
This is round about page 31 going through, 31 and 32. So, because it's also, we have to live with other people for the human race to continue, we have the right to enforce others keep the peace. I.e., when we see a wrong, if we do nothing about it, we actually are breaching another person's peace. So we've got to stop turning a blind eye. So to breach a peace, basically, the elements that need to be done, and this applies to everybody. Are you familiar with the citizen's arrest? Yeah. What's that saying? All are equal under the law, no one is above the law. We all can enforce the law. Okay?
Yeah, when you try and arrest the police, what do? They laugh at you, they fight.
Agreed. But that's a point of enforcement.
Yeah.
Okay? You know, we've been accustomed not to do it, you know.
But on the, if we were to go ahead and enact that arrest, where do we take them to? This has been
To the police station. We'll talk about that because we'll look at some things, because they're nice ways that you can actually make them look like
it used to be
idiots.
libraries, didn't it? It used to be public library that you could take them to and hold them.
Well, the problem will be solved anyway.
Ask me how I know this.
The problem will be solved. Okay, so basically before anybody can breach another peace, basically the definition is you must have evidence at the time, i.e. show them why you're breaching the peace, that they had, that a breach of peace had or would occur, and that it related to harm that was actually done or likely to be done. Okay, now the police use this thing called intended harm. And even worse than that, what we were talking about earlier, reasonably foreseeable harm. These are crimes actually against the mind.
And under Mental Health Act, there's no harm to anyone they're taking people in.
Yeah. Okay. Now, I have a problem with this concept of thought crimes. Okay. Because thought crimes, where do you draw the line? So basically, when people get involved with breaches of the peace, and we need to take the high road, we need to show the new standard, the new reality. What you think doesn't mean you're going to manifest it. Therefore, what you think, until harm's actually caused, there is no breach of the peace. Okay. So now, the reason this goes all the way to the point that with the intent, you cannot act preemptively. You can't, you know, this preemptive strike nonsense about let's go and blow the Iraqis up or something, you know, utter rubbish. There is no basis in law for any action like that. Unless your life is under imminent attack, your right of self-defense then allows you to defend yourself from any breach of the peace. So that means that it may be that it's how you react. Only you yourself will know whether that's proportionate to the threat. A judge can't decide if you're using excessive violence or reasonable violence or that. It doesn't matter. It's a matter for the jury. Okay? Because really nobody knows what's going on in your mind. At the time you may have the absolute belief, without a doubt, I am in immediate danger of my life, or harm being done to myself. So that's a matter of a jury. And, but so, bear in mind, this here now comes between that point of right of survival, where instinct takes over, and rationality. If you're rational, though, then that is how you will be judged, on rationality rather than survival instinct. So in the rationality, it's basically about using reasonable force to counter the threat. Now, there's a case, Commissioner of Police versus Commissioner of Police of the Metropolis versus Razi, and that said, order following is not lawful excuse. Even as a police officer, you need to verify the information that you're given and satisfy yourself, i.e. apply your mind, not somebody else's mind, before you act upon any information given by an informant or by your boss. Okay? So if anybody approaches you, quite simply, show me the evidence, okay, that gives you the right to breach my peace. And guess what? That's the solution for the police, for the doctors, for the nurses, for everybody else that's asked to do something. They need to go to their bosses and say, hey, hang on, this doesn't sit right. My conscience says, something's not right here. Can you show me what you're asking me to do is lawful? Show me the evidence. Okay? So the solution, what I'm saying we need, is the solution for the people that don't want to follow orders. Okay? But the problem we have is, how else do we then put food on the table and pay for the rent?
Yes.
Okay? So for that, we need to build an alternative reality. We need to create the future. And to do that, the better understanding we've got of the problem as to how we got here, the more viable solutions we're going to find in the future, because we've got knowledge of what doesn't work. And what we have doesn't work. Okay, it's got us into this mess. So you clear, everything comes back to breach of peace. That's it. If I've made an oath or bound myself to duties, rights and obligations, if I do not uphold that, then I am breaching somebody's peace. And that's why the oath is the contract with the people. That's what it is. Not legislation. There's no joinder in legislation. But in the oath they undertake to govern the people according to their law. And the police to keep the peace, protect people and property according to law. That's the contract with us. That's the social contract. The judiciary, no bias, independent, according to law. So that's how simple the whole system actually is, expressed not only in Marx's head, not only in the rules of equity, not only in the common law precedents, but also in their own rule book. Okay? So what you have is the thought is expressed, it's starting here with the 10%, they then are realizing, oh yeah, okay, now we need to change it. So a lot of the legislation is equitable, okay? And one reason it's equitable, and you know it's equitable, is it doesn't matter what regulations they put in place, they'll always ask you, have you got a reasonable excuse not to comply? They know they cannot enforce that. You always have the right to defend yourself, and that's what grants you a reasonable excuse. So everything is about breach of peace, and breach of peace is simple. In Scotland with Karen, in her employment tribunal, the judge turned around to me and said, oh Mark, your stuff's all theoretical and philosophical. I said, okay, let's test it under your own court's rules. Bring Creator in to say that NHS can tell Karen what to do without her consent, and yeah, the judge just shut up. Why? It's a simple truth they can't disprove, using their own rule book. So this is sort of what we need, really simple stuff like that. So the Justice of Peace Act, 1361, this problem we have today already was dealt with in 1361. Why? Because we haven't learned. Okay? Remember the vortex? We haven't learned. We've got to go back to the bottom of the society. Some of us have learned, and we're the ones that are creating the change. Okay, so breach of peace, breach of peace, breach of peace. What that means is every single interaction needs lawful excuse to continue. So a policeman comes up and then basically I've got sort of like, honestly this stuff you can play with how you like. When I started the Peacekeepers, we went down to London and we to test, okay? And the concept is simple. In any place where you're gathering evidence, get a flipping video recording and get 2 witnesses, okay? So Joseph got arrested in the one protest, and this is the universe working. There were 2 arrests, or 1 attempted arrest and 1 actual arrest on the day. And from me to Liam is where they both occurred, in miles of people. That's the universe. And the first one, basically the police were really stupid because they had their backs to the wall and everybody just surrounded, and so they had no choice but to let him go. The second one, they managed to whip Joseph off up the back street, okay, very quickly. As soon as I saw it, I just got the camera out, went up to them, what's going on here? You have a right, okay, because we're all equal under the law, nobody's above the law, to question anybody else's decision. They can't exclude you from that. Open justice principle for starting, and through their whole admission process. So I try to find out who's the arresting officer, and then the blame game starts. Okay. And then as they were taking him up the street, I was walking, literally Joseph was here in front of me and I was just walking here and the police were with him, and I was like, and so this policeman jumps in front of me. I sidestep him, I carry on. He jumps in front of me again. I say, you do that once more, I'll see you for harassment. And he turns around and says, oh, I'm just doing my job. I said, no, you're not doing your job. You're harassing. Your job is to keep the peace. Keep him down my way, and that's it. Gone. Okay? And then when they pulled him around the corner and they were waiting for the paddy wagon, I was here, videoing. A policeman comes in and says, hey, move. I said, sorry mate, I was here and I'm not stopping you doing your job. Go ahead and do whatever you need. We actually got on the video the guys colluding. They decided then who the arresting officer was, and you know, who was pressing charges and all of this stuff. And we've got it all on video. Joseph then was taken to jail, and I said to him, get your custody records. But basically, each of those steps you can escalate as far as you like and as far as you're comfortable. I was quite happy like this, because I had 2 witnesses standing over there to witness if there's any undue interactions.
Were they filming you filming them?
Yeah. But you could see that they saw Glyn and Helen over there with their cameras. Okay? There's nothing they can do. Okay? So that's the way that I've approached this whole thing. We need the evidence to get them under control, and that does change behaviour. Yeah?
If they just ignore that though, and which they did,
That's fine.
in my case they did.
Yeah.
I was surrounded and
Yeah.
had people with cameras all over the place and took me off.
Yeah.
And they just ignored it.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, no, because they've gotten away with it, that's why. They're a bunch of bullies, and the bullies have got away with it. And this is why we need to start holding them to account.
Yeah.
So basically, I go through, you know, different things in the manual. So the first thing is, when they want to breach your peace, show me the evidence. And if they can't show you the evidence, that's it. Interaction stops. Bye-bye. If they do have evidence, evaluate that based upon what would a jury determine based upon this evidence. And then say, my name's Mark Horn and my address is da 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 da. Why? because that's where the interaction stops. Once they have your name and address, then they can serve the claim because it's in the courts that they determine guilt and it's not up to the policeman. So they have no reason to do anything else once they've got your name and address. However, we can play games with this, and it depends on what people want to do. Okay? If a policeman approaches you, hi, I'm Mark. Okay, I'm doing the approach, I'm introducing myself. So why don't the police introduce themselves when they come? If they're approaching you, who the hell are you? So you can ask them for their name. And they'll say, oh, okay? I asked you for your name, I didn't ask you for your badge number, you know? Okay? And you can start to escalate. You've now given me reason to believe, by not giving me your name, that your intentions are unlawful. So you start to lay out to them. Okay?
You've got to ask 3 times.
Yeah, and the reason we ask 3 times, and we'll talk about it tomorrow, the first time is I put you with the facts, the second time is my first witness, I put you with the facts, and my first witness of your dishonour, and the third time is my second witness to the facts and my second witness of your dishonour. I.e., from the mouths of 2 witnesses made the truth be established from the Bible. That's why we need 3. So these people that tell you you need to send 8 or 10 or 20 affidavits and this, that, and the other, forget it, you only need 3. That's it. So play where you're comfortable with it, but without any witnesses who are going to stand up and know what they're doing, okay, it becomes very difficult. The badge number means nothing. Those are handed out wherever on the day, okay?
Do you not keep the same number then?
No?
Wow.
It's the warrant card that you need.
The warrant card is their payslip number, their employee number. That's fixed.
I was going to ask, do they still have a warrant card?
Yeah.
But they never they flash it like that.
Yeah.
That's right, yeah.
They'll do that.
Okay. We're actually trying to find in legislation where it shows they must identify themselves. Okay? Which you would think is so bloody obvious.
Yeah.
Why isn't it in there?
Yeah,
It is in legislation for searches and roadside stops on cars.
Just that.
Only on those 2 places can I find that they must identify themselves.
well, if you can't have an anonymous employee of the court, the same must apply to the
Correct.
police.
And that there is an excellent example of equity as substance over form.
Does it have to be in legislation for it to have validity?
Yeah, for them to comprehend. Okay.
But if
Yeah.
we take it into
Into equity, no, in equity, but equity, they don't even understand common law. Okay. Oh, seriously.
yeah.
They
Yeah.
don't
I
understand
was just-
law.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, I was looking up that exact thing and I found a thing from Hampshire Constabulary, and it wasn't, it was like a sort of code of practice for like an internal thing that was online, and they said you must show your warrant card if asked by a member of the public,
Okay, correct.
unless you're in
That
like a big
there's
scuffle or
local-
it's just impractical to get it out, but you must.
Yeah.
That was their way, but it was like themselves, but I couldn't
Yeah.
find it for
It's not.
Avon Police where we live.
Yeah, I can't
But
find it in legislation. I can find it in
in-
local company policy with some of them. Yeah.
But
it's
look
not
up your
universal.
local one.
But
they
exactly
might
that.
have it. You might not.
So the point being, until you've shown me the evidence, you have to cease your belief and desist until you can show me evidence to breach my peace. Okay? So I stand on my right, prove your claim, show me the evidence, and until then you must stop what you're doing. So down in Cornwall, Land's End, or whatever they call it down there, okay, there's a policeman that says, I'm going to give you a COVID fine in accordance with regulation da-dee-da. Can you prove it exists, please? I don't need to. Oh yeah, no, but hang on, you the person who's telling me I can't do what I'm doing. Okay? Commissioner of Police of the Metropolis vs. Rise of 2008, appeal court case says, you need to have applied your mind, so show me the evidence that this thing exists. If you can't, you need to cease. He needs to then go back to his boss and say, hey boss, somebody asked me and said, hey, does this thing exist? His boss doesn't know the answer. It goes up to the boss's boss, and it goes up to the Queen. Notice to principal is notice to agent. Notice to agent is notice to principal. It goes all the way up to the Queen, and whilst it's going up, all of the agents are told. So that means the guy up in John O'Groats knows a day or two later, hang on, there's this dispute down in Cornwall about proving this virus exists. We must cease and desist enforcing these regulations, this belief, until this dispute is settled. So where the hell do we need to lock people up for? Where the hell do we need to protest for? Where the hell do we need all this nonsense for?
We actually have a Justice Stein order that says that coronavirus is too great a burden to prove.
Too great a burden to prove, okay? It's a criminal offence, therefore they need to prove beyond reasonable doubt it exists.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is we have a Justice Stein order from Queen's Bench that says that.
That it's too much of a burden to prove.
Yeah.
That it exists, or
Well, I'm
how
sorry.
many?
But they don't prove that it exists.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, therefore that's an admission that it doesn't exist,
Yeah,
and
precisely.
therefore you've got no legitimate aim, and therefore you can't enforce the regulations. It's not rational.
May I ask, you've got something from the Queen's Bench, but I misheard the phrase before it.
Okay.
What did you call it? You've got something from the Queen's
The
Bench.
justice's name.
All right.
Justice Stein.
Okay, but you see how simple this is in
I can
life,
send you the video.
what it should be. It doesn't matter, do what you like, as soon as somebody questions it, that's it, it stops. Notice to principle, everybody knows we've got to sort this dispute out, and everybody below them knows, and therefore we should only have one incident.
Was it a means of a display of bullying in order to try and keep us under control?
No, it's just basically they think that
Okay.
okay, so, you know, they have an honest belief legislation is law. Their belief might be wrong, you know, but that's their belief. Okay, and we're all entitled to our beliefs. Yeah?
But if they don't show the evidence when you ask them, and then they kind of
And
do what
then
they're
bye-bye,
going to do,
go away, find the evidence, and then come back. We'll
Oh,
carry
well,
on
and
this
if they
conversation.
don't, then what's
No, they
the
won't.
solution?
But this is
Just
what I'm
to
saying.
Bring a claim afterwards.
What I'm trying to show you is what the system says, as opposed to what is being done.
Mm.
Because we need to understand the problem, okay? We need to see what's meant to be going on. If what's meant to be going on is the problem, we need to address that. What meant to be going on in both the courts, in the common law and legislation, says quite clearly. If you go under legislation, you've got this thing called impact assessment. What's an impact assessment? Legitimate aim, consider all reasonable options and choose the one which is least proportionate. It's on their website. They tell us. And they even tell you, most of our legislation has got no impact assessment.
Sorry, I've no idea what happened.
Oh, no, that's right. Okay, so let's assume they've got evidence then where you think, oh yeah, okay, maybe I did something wrong. Okay, I'll give you my name and address. The interaction should stop there. But it doesn't. What do they do? I don't believe you. I need to take you down the station to verify your name and address.
Steal your DNA.
Well, here's my driver's license, matey. Up yours. Bye-bye. Okay? So, if you can verify it, but even before that you can say, and what reason led you to the belief that I may be lying to you? Okay? So we've got to keep pushing them. So they're going to arrest me. Okay, fine. All right. You have not shown me any evidence. Therefore, I'm putting you with the knowledge that the arrest is unlawful. I've given you my name and address, okay, where you can serve me your beliefs, and the court will decide if I'm guilty or not you. So you have no reason to continue this interaction. But what they'll do then is, oh no, I don't believe you. What reason do you not believe me? Each interaction, show me the evidence, show me the evidence, show me the evidence. So they'll say whatever crap they'll come up with, who knows. And then they'll say, well, we're going to arrest you. So I say, well, it's unlawful and I'm going to sue you. and then they say, they try and grab you. Touch me again, okay? That's assault, okay? I'll comply with your command under duress, and you now don't have any excuse to lay a finger on me. At this point, you've entered contract. So don't give them a reason then that you're going to try and run. Okay, do whatever they want. Okay? But that way, they have no lawful excuse to touch you, let alone to handcuff you. Now, the first check and balance is when you get to the police station, or is meant to be when you get to the police station. The check and balance is you get handed over to the custody officer. The custody officer should evaluate the evidence, okay? Their side and your side. This is another thing also. At the time, they should gather the evidence before they even evaluate and apply their mind to the evidence. What they'll do is, like with the COVID centres, it's because the COVID centre phoned the police, okay, and they won't even ask anybody else for evidence, they'll just handcuff people and take them to jail. Hang on, I've also got something to say here. You need to take the evidence from me and weigh up the evidence before you take me anywhere. But when you get handed over to the custody officer's job is to, guess what? All the actions so far, have they been lawful? Therefore, they must evaluate the evidence and determine, okay, sorry, we haven't got the evidence, we apologise, you know, here's 150 quid. You know, say you're going through the IPCC, we'll just give it to you now, or whatever. Okay? And if the evidence is there, it is not there, they must release you according to their rule book. Okay?
Mark, you know how we're allowed to make a phone call once from the police station?
We'll get on to that.
Okay, thanks.
Okay? So what they do is say, but we've got to secure evidence. Oh, thank you for admitting my unlawful arrest. You've just admitted you haven't got the evidence. Okay? Then they'll say, but we need to take your phone. Why do you need to take my phone? Because 25% of phones in the UK are stolen. We need to check yours isn't. What evidence has led you to the belief that mine is? I don't care if 25% or 50% are stolen. What makes you believe my phone is stolen?
Well, unfortunately, when 4 or 5 coppers all around you,
Agreed.
you don't have the opportunity to discuss that. So it's just
No,
like
agreed.
boom, 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 and you're off.
No, but
So
again,
it's
what
nice. It's nice
Yeah,
to
yeah.
think
but
you've
the
got that
thing is,
opportunity.
what it is, this is with the energy and aura. They tend to, okay, what they'll do is railroad a leader, or they'll pick on a weakling. Okay, and they can see that by the body language, the aura, the energy. Okay, they're very selective with who they pick to arrest and stuff like that. They want to pick out the leader who's going against their will, and so that it doesn't spread and build confidence in the people. And they want to pick 1 or 2 weaklings to make an example to stop other people doing it. And this is why, as soon as we see anything like this, get in there with a camera, ask other people to witness, get them involved. We need to start standing up for one another and supporting one another.
That's been the problem.
Instead of just like this sheepish nonsense. So Joseph gave me his name and phone number, but he wouldn't give it to the police. I said to Joseph, yeah, I'm getting all this evidence, but I need to get it to you. What's your name and what's your phone number? And he gave it to me on the camera. And the police didn't give it to him. Yeah, they might have overheard it, but it doesn't really matter. So the custody officer, they've got something called the threshold test. There's 2 tests, threshold test, I can't remember off the top of my head, the details I don't know. So there's a form